Welcome to Tulsa, Oklahoma, live into the fire with Ronnie Leatherman. I'm Jason White. We're glad to be here. Today's date is April the 26th, 2024, and this is episode number 20. Who would have thought we would have made it to episode number 20 without any cancellations or murders along the way that made us have to cancel? How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing really good. Amanda, throw up what week this is. You said that there's a law enforcement week that we're in right now. If she'll throw that, yeah, there you go. So it's Police Week, 2024 Police Week, and so that's a good deal. Anything going on in your world?
Yeah, a little change in employment. There's a grant position that the Tulsa Police Department was able to secure, and they posted a little opening, and I applied for it. So I'm going to be coming back and working with you as a crime scene detective / I guess civilian detective. I won't be a sworn police officer, but I get to come back and help out on some cold cases for this grant. So kind of excited about that and get to work with you again.
You're more like a cold case. You're like a civilian cold case detective, which is what you are. So this I've got a really busy week coming up, man. I'm telling you, tomorrow I'll be speaking at the Bartlesville Police Department award ceremony. They asked me to come up there and speak. I'm excited, and that'll be a lot of fun. And I'll be speaking there. And then Sunday morning, I'll be heading to Boise, Idaho, where I'll be speaking in Boise. And that will be actually I'm lined up to speak on Monday. See, Ashleigh, that's going to be coming on here, Ashleigh Berg, who is an absolute superstar there she is. She's an absolute superstar when it comes to crime scene stuff. And that's why I was like, we have got to have her on here. This is her first podcast like this, and she had no idea when she met me, and we actually hung out at some dueling piano bar, but her and her husband and myself and some other cops from throughout Texas. But anyway, she had no idea that not only were we on a show, well, she might have known about the first 48, at least I talked about it, but she had no idea that we are world known radio personalities, right? So this is, I mean, she went straight to the big time for this. But so that's what's going on. I'll be heading to Idaho, and that's going to be a lot of fun. And then from there, man, I don't know. My schedule's just stupid busy. And also we have had some tornadic weather going on throughout Oklahoma. So and actually in Texas too, there's a little bit of crazy stuff going on down there. So you never know. We might have some kind of a technical difficulty. And if that happens, then so be it. That's just the way it rolls. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Oh, Amanda, throw up that other picture. I want that class photo. There you go. So last week I actually was down there, and I was down in Oklahoma City, and I was speaking. That kind of got thrown up accidentally last week. And Amanda didn't know what it was, but what that was is basically I was teaching to the Cleat Academy down in Oklahoma City. So throw that up one more time. And, I should have taken a picture of them before we started, because that photo right there, I'm telling you, they look much smarter there than they did when we started. That's a guarantee. And they know how to do death. They got a taste of death investigations. And
they look enlightened to me.
They're ready to roll, man. They're ready to hit the streets, and they're ready to make a difference.
How many places across, I guess mainly North America, because I don't think you've went other than that, do you think you've taught at? States, provinces, cities?
I think I've taught.
Give me a rough number.
I think I've taught at about 17 states. I've taught in California twice. I will be speaking in New York twice. I've taught in Kentucky 7 times. I've taught a lot of different places. So from one end of the coast, one end of the country to the other, 17 states or 18. And I've spoke in Canada, in Alberta, Canada, which actually it's Calgary. So, and I've actually spoken Puebla, Mexico as well, but that was pre-cop days. So that's before it was super, super scary. I don't know that I would really want to do that, but anyway, I've been all over the place, and I'm interested in going other places too. So I get the question all the time, and I'll mention this real quick. A lot of people go, oh my gosh, you're going here, you're going there. Is there any way that I can go and attend? Most of the places that I speak, no. Although I do speak to civilians, I speak to the general citizens. Those are going to be a little bit of a different deal. I do it more locally here, actually, but we do have those from time to time. And You know, if you brought a truck full of money and you arranged it, I'm sure we can make arrangements and have that happen. But I am available for that if need be. All right, well, let's get rolling. I don't want to waste any more time here. Ashleigh is I'm gonna go ahead and start reading her bio, and you talk about an impressive person. I was really shocked at how little time compared to what we've been doing this that she's been doing it, and she's way impressive. Investigator Ashleigh Berg, and she's got a lot of initials behind her name, which I'm going to ask her about those later. But Ashleigh is a senior forensic investigator for a major suburban sheriff's office in the North Texas area. She has served in the forensics field in a law enforcement capacity since 2010. Ashleigh holds a master peace officer license and is TCOL instructor, which she told me a minute ago means Texas Commission on Law Enforcement Instructor, who holds a bachelor's degree with a split major in forensic science and criminal psychology and a master's degree in forensic psychology. Ashleigh is a certified, this is the part where it gets really crazy, Ronnie, and you work in the lab right now, so you're going to know that this is a lot. But Ashleigh is a certified latent print examiner, a certified bloodstain pattern analyst, and a certified senior crime scene analyst by the International Association for Identification. She has been qualified as an expert in the areas of crime scene investigation, latent print identification, bloodstain pattern analysis, shooting incident reconstruction, and crime scene reconstruction in multiple Tulsa district and federal courts, and consults on major cases in multiple jurisdictions. She also serves as an adjunct instructor and course content developer for the Texas A&M Texas Engineering Extension Service, known as, I'm going to say the TEEX, Texas Forensic Science Academy, and is fortunate enough to get to travel across the state teaching various forensic topics to law enforcement. She is a published author and a member of ACSR, which I think is the Association of Crime Scene Reconstruction, where she previously served on the board of directors, a member of the International Association of Blood Pattern Analysis. I took a stab at that. I think that's what it is. The IAI and the Texas Division of IAI. Let's welcome Ashleigh Berg to the show. I know that's a lot. That's a lot. And I know sometimes Ronnie, he's like, it's so much, but I got to read it. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah.
You're somebody
that's, you do what you got to do.
If you're somebody out there in the world that is looking for an instructor to come in and talk about crime scenes, you're looking at her right there. I'm not kidding you. I saw her speak in San Antonio at the Texas Homicide Investigator class, or that basically their thing that they put on every year, and she's amazing. So welcome, Ashleigh. Glad you're here.
Thank you.
Hello, Ashleigh.
Hi, how are y'all?
Doing
We're
well.
very good. I want to know, for the first question and out of the box, I want to know, I'm just, for anybody that's out there that is thinking about getting into the world of crime scene, because you're a police officer, right? You are a gun carrying police officer with a badge. You just happen to have kind of diverted into a specialty area where are you over the lab, or you're close to it?
So we have a sergeant that oversees the lab, and then I'm the investigator that's been there the longest. So that makes me the senior investigator in the lab.
Okay.
Yes.
So tell me how somebody I mean, this has taken you a ton of time to get to the positions and get all these certifications that you have, but, and also you've been an author too, and we'll get into that in a little bit, but so how does somebody how did you get to where you're at and all this training? Oh my gosh, it's crazy.
So, I mean, whether you're civilian or sworn, there are multiple paths into forensics, and that's going to be dependent on the department that you work for. Ours chooses to use sworn, and both departments I've worked for use sworn. But it's really, it's education, and in forensics, it's a constant education. It's not a field where you can take a 40-hour class and then you're done, you're good. You have to stay on the cutting edge of the science, because the science is constantly changing. And so if you're going to put yourself out there as an expert, you have to maintain that constant knowledge of what is the new technology and what is the new science and what are we saying in the field, because what you learned 5 years ago is not what we're doing today necessarily. So it's constant education.
Yeah.
But so the stuff that you did 5 years ago, though, at some point those cases went to court. So you're not saying that stuff is irrelevant or wasn't accurate or anything like that. So
no.
Explain that, I guess.
No. So what I'm saying is, like, if you want to maybe know your way around a crime scene as let's say a regular detective, right? A general detective. So our CID division is split between investigators and forensic investigators. Yeah. So for my regular investigators to go to a general level 1 40-hour BPA class so that they understand what the different mechanisms of bloodstain are, so that when we have a conversation about bloodstain, they understand what we're talking about. That's sufficient. But for someone who's going to actually be interpreting those bloodstains on a regular basis and offering opinions, for me to go to one 40-hour bloodstain course 15 years ago and then to offer testimony 15 years later and say that I'm sufficient and current in my training, that won't cut it. There's constant education, because you have to show current competency in the field.
Right.
Yeah, and I think if any of the viewers are avid Netflix watchers or any crime scene show watchers, probably the one that comes to mind for me is The Staircase. And in that show, talking about the guy that allegedly killed his wife, and the crime scene guy that, well, actually he worked for, was it SLED, or he works for one of them, it was North Carolina, whatever they call it, but where he was doing all the models and all this, that, and the other. And Henry Lee, actually. Do you know Henry Lee? Dr. Henry Lee?
Not personally, no, sir.
Okay. He's going to be on here in the near future. He said he would be on here, but so tell me, basically, you're like a one-stop shop. I mean, based on all of the stuff that you talked about, is there any disciplines that you're still working on? You can do shooting reconstruction, bloodstain analysis, anything virtually with crime scenes, including latent prints. And I think that one of the things that's impressive about that is you can use all of the chemicals that go with that, right? Is that,
Yes.
I mean, basically. So let's just talk about fingerprints for a brief minute. Tell us a little bit about the different things that you can do with respect to printing things and the different chemicals associated with that.
So for us, we go out, we work the scene, we bring everything back, or that we're going to process in our lab. We run fully functional lights, powders, chemicals. We have a fuming chamber. If we want to fume with cyanoacrylate, that is something that we do. We also run ninhydrin, indanedione, DFO. We have all of the chemicals to process porous items, papers, cardboard, wood, things like that. But then we fume non-porous items. We dye stain. We have blood reagents if we have bloody prints, so we can cross process there as well for processing for blood imprints. And then we are an APHIS hub, so we can run everything in-house and get all of our identifications done that way as well.
I know along the way with most of the cases I worked, and I know a lot that Jason worked, it seems like the forensic side of it kind of confirms some of the stuff that we would learn from talking to people. And both of us have talked tons of times about how a lot of the cases we saw was talking to people. How many cases do you think you have like just broken open on, hey, here's a fingerprint, here's a DNA, you guys need to go look here because the gunshot came from here, and then somebody found video? How has that kind of worked, if you can talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it works both ways. And it has for us. Sometimes I used to work with an investigator who said that he talked to people and I talked to things. Yeah. And then when we talked to each other, that's where the best case developed. And sometimes it works that way, where they're talking to people, and sometimes what I have to say confirms that, and sometimes it pushes the investigation in a completely different direction. But we have had several cases, some quite recently, where we have 3 or 4 people, but then I run a print and I'm like, hey, who's this guy? Does anybody know this guy? And it's someone we've never, heard of. Or we had a shooting recently where everyone in the scene, because it was so chaotic, said, shooter came in this way. This is what happened. That's great, except that we do the analysis and the bullets came from the opposite direction, and our shooter actually wasn't in the room. He was outside, and so then we're like, we need to go look for video. And now we're looking in a completely different direction and find the shooter somewhere else. So, no matter.
That's what I think would.
I'm sorry. Ahead. I was just going to say that what I like about forensics is that no matter what words come out of people's mouth, the truth has to align with the way that objects behave according to the laws of physics on planet Earth. And so those things can't lie to us.
You kind of just, you were just saying stuff better than I was getting ready to say. Like, I feel like the stuff talking to people is more of an artwork and doing stuff where what you do is scientific, and it is what it is. Either this is a fingerprint from Joe Blow or from Fred over there, and no matter what someone told the detectives, you're going to be the one to confirm that. Be like, okay, yeah, even though they said that makes no sense at all based on the actual evidence. So
as long as
something that I think is cool.
Scientific theory is applied properly, the science is done, which is a huge point of contention in the field, making sure that it's good science and it's properly applied by a well-trained analyst,
which I guess goes into that, keeping your stuff up to date. So
absolutely.
There you go.
Absolutely.
Well, since we're on fingerprints real quick. Now, APHIS, I just have the question about this because we had Gil Carrillo on here, and Gil Carrillo is a friend of mine. He was one of the leads, co-lead really, on the Night Stalker case out of California. And one of the things that he was talking about, and of course we're talking about murders that happened back in the 80s.
Sure.
So what he would talk about is he said that there were some prints that literally they would have to almost know who the guy was. It's not like they could go through an automated fingerprint identification system like we have today.
Right.
So the question that I have for you, and I really should know the answer to this, but I don't know everything. But the thing is, you know what I mean? But if we get some prints on a scene, are those things constantly getting searched? I mean, once they plot out like various places on a print. And that goes in the machine. Is that thing constantly just working it?
Now that depends. So once an analyst places a print into APHIS, and it depends on the level of APHIS. So you have local APHIS, you have state APHIS, you have FBI like national, and then you have international, like say if it's an Interpol search or it's whatever. There are multiple levels of APHIS, but there's a one and done search. And then if you want your print to remain in the system, then you have to put it into the unsolved latent file. And that is where a print is periodically searched against the known database. And then when new files are entered, it will be searched against those known prints. But otherwise, APHIS is a one and done search. And if you want to run it again, you'll have to pull that case, re-enter it, and search it like a new latent.
Okay, so that you mentioned a word there. You said periodically. So does that mean that you have to? And the reason why I ask is because I've got a cold case that I'm working right now that, that I'm like, well, we're talking CODIS world, but I don't think it's much different. It's kind of the same almost, right? In a sense.
So CODIS, when CODIS goes in, they are run, and they're run when new samples go in. The case samples are run against them. It may take a while, but they're run against them. With APHIS, when you search a print, it's run that one time, unless you manually add it to the unsolved latent file, which lives in APHIS. And then your print will be run like a CODIS sample. It lives in there until you remove it.
Okay. Is that I'm sorry. I think you're probably going to ask the same thing, but go ahead.
I was just going to say, is that just some policy with whatever created that, or is there a law that says this has to happen? I think maybe something you were going to say, Jason, that would hit me is like, whatever the case happens to be, the crime, if you had a fingerprint, why would it not just logically make sense to have a file of here's all these fingerprints of someone who's involved in a crime, and anytime new stuff gets put in there, we're going to test it and hopefully we get a match someday. if that makes sense.
I think if I understand the way you're asking, so it's up to the agency to decide if they want to leave that in there, because when you run a print, you're not necessarily connecting it to an offense. So there's no way to know what's the statute of limitations, when does this print need to come out of the system, all of that. And so it's up to each individual agency if they do or don't want to add that to unsolved latent file.
Mm-hmm.
And so you make that decision.
But if it does get put in that unsolved one, does it stay until
It stays until
somebody takes it out?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
All right, let me throw another thing at you, and then we'll probably move on to a different scientific discipline. But I am curious about this. What are your thoughts of, like, I've always thought about this, and Ronnie and I I think we've talked about this, and that was like, I've always thought about, wouldn't it be neat to just print some of these people that we have a pretty good idea that these people are involved in stuff when we print them at the ME's office and search them, just to try to solve cases from the past. You see what I'm saying? Has that ever been discussed, or is that kind of a privacy? I mean, the guy's dead. It's not like the guy or gal is dead. It's not like it's a privacy issue at this point. Has that ever been discussed in the world of fingerprinting?
I don't know. I don't know. So if they don't, you mean like if they don't have a criminal history?
I'm talking, just like, you know what I mean? There's people on these suicides and stuff like that. You're like, it would be really interesting to just throw them into APHIS and do a search just to see if anything came out of that.
So I know that, like, the rules for APHIS entry, so like who's in APHIS, you have a criminal database, obviously, and then you have a civil database, and those are merged. And so I know what we are allowed access to, like, we're not allowed access to driver's license files. But we are allowed access to civil files, like applicant files. So if you've ever applied for a nurse's license or a peace officer license or a license to carry, or military records, things like that, there are certain things that we have access to and certain things that we don't. So there are very strict rules about who even goes into APHIS.
Okay.
So,
what are your thoughts along that? And I know you said you wanted to kind of move on, Jason, but again, I guess my thing is, if you have someone who's committed a crime, you have their fingerprints. Is that what you were saying? There's either a law or policies that says that can't stay in there forever? Because, I mean, as now we all kind of know, there's a bunch of repeat offenders around.
Now those stay. Criminal offenses, and I saw a question pop up across the bottom, and I wanted to make sure that I clarified when I was talking about prints not staying in the system. What doesn't stay is the actual latent print, like our crime scene print that we run. What does stay is the known prints that are in the database. So known offenders, their prints stay unless there is an expunction. So if we come back and that record is actually expunged from their criminal record, then those prints stay in APHIS.
Okay, and real quick, I know that, listen, I'm fascinated with fingerprints. I'm fascinated with all of it. The scientific, that's what's cool about homicide. And it's because homicide, we kind of get to intersect with the world of science just a little bit. There's a few disciplines like child crisis. I think that sex crimes and homicide and really crime scene, those are the ones that really, for the most part, I guess you could theoretically say, forged documents is another world of part of it and so forth. But so all of the chemicals that you use like ninhydrin, amino black, all of these different things. All right. So what does one do that doesn't, why can't they just have one that is just the one thing that they use? And I know they use powder and all this, that, and the other. Am I kind of making sense?
Each one of those chemicals is targeting a different part of the latent residue. So like ninhydrin reacts with the amino acids in the sweat, and silver nitrate reacts with the salts in the sweat. And so one print may be really heavy in amino acid residue and not have salt. One print may not have so much amino acids in it, but maybe it's really heavy on salt. And so we have all of these chemicals that target different parts of the deposition. And so we're hoping that in some part of our array that we throw at this print, we hit what has been deposited. So we have what we call sequential processing. You have to know, or we have to know, what order you can put these chemicals down in. You can't just go in there with whatever you choose. There's a certain order that you hit things with these chemicals, because if I use silver nitrate first, I have to know that while it reacts with salt, it kills everything else in the print. So if I do silver nitrate first and I don't get a result, I can't use anything else because I've just washed away everything else that could possibly be there. So I have to start, with the first chemical, and then I work my way down to maybe get a result. So that's why we have so many different things, is because we are hitting all of the different possibilities that are in a latent residue.
Yeah. Am I coming through at all, Ronnie?
You are now. Yeah. I was going to say, so I guess this is going to be super basic for you, but for the people who are listening, what exactly is a fingerprint on like a piece of glass? That what got left behind that lets you, and you've kind of talked about it, but can you kind of just explain for like a grade school type of way of, here's what a fingerprint is on certain substances?
So when you look at your hand, you can see the ridges that are on the ends of your fingers and across your palms. And so each one of those ridges are made up of teeny tiny little units, and each individual unit has a sweat pore on it. So each time your heart beats, your body is excreting waste out of your body, things it doesn't need. And so that sweat is made up of amino acids and salts and liquids and all different types of chemicals. And so that residue then coats your fingers. And so when you touch an item, you're depositing that residue on the item, but you deposit it in the pattern of your friction ridges, your fingerprints. And that's what we're trying to develop, either with powders or chemicals, super glue, whatever the mechanism is that we're developing. That's what we're after.
All right. I got one. And listen, Ron, if you've got a follow-up that you want to ask about prints, you can. But I want to ask this because this is something I really want to do. I really want to try this. We had a murder years and years ago. Do you remember that case that we had that was John Brown's, where there was the bloody footprints, and it was all right. So that's what the deal was. Has this ever been done? I'm sure it has. I've just never seen it, but I want to do it. And that's going back to the parents and getting the fingerprint card that they did when they were born, and comparing that card of the handprints and the feet prints to adult prints. Is that number one? That's possible, right?
Absolutely. Okay. So as long as the card, the known card is legible, is readable, as long as it's clear. So the fingerprints you're born with are the fingerprints you die with. Your friction ridges have stopped development by 16 weeks gestation. So about the time your mom is figuring out that she's pregnant with you, your fingerprints are set for life. And barring an injury that reaches down into the dermis, which is past every nerve ending in your finger or your toe, or like a severe burn, something like that, your fingerprints are going to remain the same because they're encoded in your DNA. Now, the spatial relationships, like the distance from ridge to ridge, is going to change because obviously you grow. We don't come out full size, and our mom is very thankful for that, right? So that spatial relationship is going to change, but the arrangement of the minutia, the points that we're looking for on ridge to ridge, that does not change. Your pattern is set, and you're born with it and you die with it. Okay. So that comparison can be done with the understanding that, this person is 65 now and they were brand new when it was made.
Have you heard of a case in court where that's actually been done?
I have not heard of it, but the theory, would be easy to defend.
Yeah, we need to do that.
There are hundreds of years of fingerprint science to back that up.
Yeah.
One last thing, Jason, on fingerprints. What's the difference of like a fingerprint impression in, say, like, I don't know, silly putty or a substance like that as compared to one that's left on the glass?
So the difference is how we process it and then how we have to compare it. You're in something like that is a 3D impression like that. you're either going to cast it or you're going to photograph it, and you're going to have to understand that it's a negative impression, right?
Right.
The
That's what
ridges,
I was talking about.
yeah, the ridges and the valleys are going to be flip-flopped. So you're going to have to understand that when you compare it, and either, change your photograph or just know in your head that, hey, I need to follow the valleys, not the high points when I'm
All
comparing.
right. Let's talk a little bit about the Bloodstain Pattern Analysis, just real quick. So
Yes,
I know you love talking about that stuff. And the
Blood
presentation, and you're probably like, yep, that's this.
Yep, that's it.
So throw up a couple of the other slides that I'd sent you, because the other picture, like this kind of stuff, there is a whole science that goes on with respect to interpreting blood. And this is relatively new, is it not? I mean, how far back are we going with this?
So if we're talking IBPA, we're going back to the early 80s, I guess.
I'd say that's pretty recent.
Yeah.
So 40 years,
yeah. Early 80s, so yeah. I appreciate that you feel like that's recent. I'm going to go ahead and say that. I personally that.
Yeah, so bloods, that's what I'm talking about right there. So what this stuff does, and I took that basic 40-hour class in New York City, and Ronnie, I don't think you never made it to the 40-hour of that, did you?
No, I didn't go to that one.
And when I was talking to Ashleigh off air, that's something that we literally, I mean, we spent a hard week at just really analyzing blood droplets, and we actually took a club. I don't want people to get freaking out about it, because people always freak out about animals, but literally it was like a frozen pig's head that basically they brought it in there, and then you just bludgeon the heck out of this head of a pig, and it had all the cast off and stuff, and then we would do all of the other stuff that, all the stuff. I don't even know the proper terminology, but basically the directionality of it and bringing it back to the point of origin and stuff like that. And if you don't use it, you lose it. But so that's where it all begins. That's the basic level 1 that you're talking about. Am I right?
Yes.
And so what can you do with, and you showed a case that was absolutely phenomenal that talked about, I mean, where there was voids and everything else. And it really made, at the beginning, I'm sitting there looking at it like, heck, I don't know. I've seen hundreds of homicide scenes. I'm looking at these pictures, and I didn't want to even speak. I was like, please don't call on me, because I'm going to look really stupid. But so you're looking at the blood, and what is that going to tell you? I kind of touched on some of it. What does it tell you?
Well, it has the potential to tell you a lot of things. It can tell you about force. It can tell you potentially about mechanism that created the pattern. It can tell you potentially about position of the blood source when the bloodletting event occurred. Sometimes it can give you a lot of information. Sometimes it doesn't give you as much. It's more about limiting, not that it was here, but that it wasn't possible to be here, here, or here. And so you have to be careful about what it can or can't tell you.
What would be like something that just immediately jumps out to you that this wasn't from a gunshot wound? This was from someone hitting someone with a baseball bat or similar type of object. What's kind of just some generic stuff along those lines?
A lot of times, other than like a big bullet hole in the middle of my pattern,
right?
I love
Let's
that.
say there's no body there.
Right?
The body's not there.
Right. No, so we look at stain size. We look at distribution of the stains, how they're laid out on a target surface, and we look at volume of blood, how that volume is deposited across the scene.
And I think something I was maybe thinking was, and Jason kind of talked about the cast off stuff. If someone gets shot with a gun, that's going to be different than blood that's on a bat and getting
absolutely right.
Around.
If you have multiple impacts, like from a gunshot, let's say there's a single shot, we're looking for that one pattern in one area. But if you, like in a beating per se, you're talking about multiple strikes to a blood source, then once that blood source is getting hit over and over again, you're going to have the primary point of impact. But as your weapon becomes bloody, then you're also going to have stains from that weapon moving through the environment, and it's going to be depositing stains, or what we call cast off. You're going to have cast off stains on your on surfaces in the crime scene as well. And so that creates a completely different type of pattern. Those stains are shaped differently. They lay out in linear or curvilinear deposition versus the impact pattern, which we expect to see in a V in another part of the scene. It's a completely different presentation.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at, and you've explained it well. So thank you.
Yeah, and I've got a recent case too that I've seen enough cases that I know what cast off's looking like, and I can tell that there's some cast off from some sort of an impact, and then from there. But what I'm really interested in is I'm interested in the passive blood droplets that are the 90-degree blood droplets, which is likely going to be the perpetrator and stuff, so forth. At least in this case specifically. So I'll tell you what. She's also an author. She's contributed to this book, and be proud of this because this is pretty amazing. There you go. You've thrown it up there. It's under Ashleigh Portalis, but actually her name now is Ashleigh Berg. But if you need to search for it that way, if you're interested in a good read, I actually purchased it after I heard her speak. I was like, oh my gosh, I got to have this in my library, and I'm reading through it now, and it's absolutely. For the cops that are in this business, you should read it for sure, no doubt about it. I don't know that the general citizen is going to be reading forensic or sexual forensics, but you never know. I mean, there's everybody out there that's a fan of this stuff. So what I'm talking about in this, you are into the psychology stuff too. Tell us a little bit about your psychology background. You're just not doing that kind of science. You know about that other stuff. So tell us about that.
So,
And by the way, hang on. Let me stop you real quick. You're one, because if I don't say it now, I'll forget it. You're one of what? How many in the world that has these certifications?
So BPA, there's 64
in the world.
Yes, sir.
So, oh my gosh, that's mind-boggling right there. And
but then you said you had some combined stuff that was a lot lower number. What's up with that one?
And I only know this because my agency asked. But when we combine all the certifications, there are four.
Four of you in the whole wide world.
On the planet.
Yes.
Where are the others? I mean, you don't have to name them, but where are the other four people? Or the three other people?
There's one in Kansas, and I'm not sure where the other two are.
Okay. That's just insane to me. 4 people on the planet with all of that. So let's talk about your psychology stuff, because this is where you really dive into the thinking of what kind of a perpetrator you may be looking at, and that I'm thinking, right? I can't believe you're not a profiler already, but
well, and we kind of talked about this at HIT, right? I feel like from a reconstruction perspective, and really from an investigative perspective, I think every cop is a little bit of a psychologist, no matter where you're assigned. Like even on patrol, like you have 5 seconds to decide whether this person in the car is a threat to you or not, so we really all have a little bit of that in us, because you deal with people. But in investigations and in forensics, so when we're talking about murders, we talked about at HIT that specifically, these are events that occur whether spontaneously or through planned events. We're different than the psychologist who gets the self-report, right? Somebody shows up in the office and they present, they want help, but the psychologist is getting whatever the person presents. And that's the only view into their life they get. But we, as the investigators, get that behind the curtain look, because we're in their personal space. And, we talked about that, when somebody's coming over to your house, you clean up the common areas, you clean up the living room, you clean up the kitchen, you clean up the places that people are going to be. But your private spaces, you just close the door. Well, when we show up to conduct an investigation and someone has been killed or someone has died, we're opening all those doors and we're looking in all those places. And so that's really where the real person, like we really get to see who these people are. Or if it's a planned event, if our offender has left this for us, we're really getting to see who he or she is, because they have, that is their brain in action. The brain is the organ of behavior. And so we are really seeing their brain on display, like they've laid it out for us. And so if you know how to read that, you get a different perspective of your crime scene because you kind of get an insight into who you're looking for. They're telling you who they are. You just have to know how to listen to it.
What's without naming names, what's an example of the case you've worked on where that type of work has helped lead to a suspect and kind
Sure.
of
So, well, sometimes it's about finding the suspect, and sometimes it's about freeing the innocent. A lot of times, we can focus in on the easy answer, especially when we talk about equivocal death, when it's a homicide versus suicide question, and it really looks kind of janky. So several times, really being able to dig into who is this person, who is dead. You can ask them all day, hey, what happened? But they just lay there, right? They don't tell you anything.
Right.
But they're telling you all kinds of things. If you look around, when you can get into writings and just looking at how they live, you can see the psychology of a person. And so you can also see the psychology of the people they live with. And so you start to see like relationships with people and between players in a home, between people, and you start to see what's going on. And we've also seen sometimes, that there's no right way to react to trauma. Everybody is different. And so, we find that sometimes in a traumatic event, a person's first statement is very short and they won't remember a lot of actions that they took. And sometimes those actions alter our crime scenes, and they can look overt and they can look intentional, but sometimes they were just a reaction to trauma. And so they won't tell us about that. And then you've altered my crime scene. And so now it looks like, you were intentionally trying to, hide evidence or manipulate the evidence or whatever. And maybe it was just a reaction to trauma. And so we have to be really careful about assumptions that we make or making that leap from, it's a long way from traumatic reaction to murder. And so we have to be real careful about how we handle that. And so if you can kind of take a step back and like parse through that carefully, you can arrive at the correct answer when you pair it with the science. Like it's never just a hunch, right? You have to, it's not ever one piece or one thing or one test. It's the totality of everything that you've picked up and put in your pocket that gives you the answer.
And it sounds probably a little morbid, but I was always fascinated with suicide notes and just the wide range of them, from a single sentence. And
Sure.
this probably sounds weird. Like some of them were funny. Like their personality would come out and be like, all right, hey, I'm out of here. See you guys some other place. And then some would have pages and pages of all this stuff they dealt with in their life. And I just always found that fascinating.
Absolutely.
So it's just crazy. The
Well,
wide range of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, give me kind of an example of what you're talking about. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but just kind of like, for instance, in a quick story, like something that you walk in there where, the cops are just like, I don't really know what's going on here. But yeah, you walk in there and you're like, okay, this is kind of, if you even can, that's kind of a tough question because it's.
So like we had I worked a case once where, we had a female who was deceased, and her wound pattern was very odd. It was unlike anything I had ever seen related to a gunshot. And blood stains were, very prominent. We looked at this, it hit. And it really looked like her husband had potentially murdered her. That is really what it looked like. And that was really the way the investigation was leaning. And we spent a long time in the bedroom, from reconstructing stains, reconstructing gunshot trajectories, we had multiple gunshots. We had some cartridge cases that had been moved. We had like a lot of everything basically working against us that you could think of. And it wasn't until our investigators are working on, shoring up surveillance videos, shoring up statements, shoring up all of that kind of stuff, checking the details and making sure everything works out. But until we really got into her writings, is where her mental illness really started to come out, and you started to get her view of herself, and her self-hatred came out. And it wasn't we finally found a note she had left on a computer that was backdated to a time, that her husband wasn't around. And we could check all that when we downloaded her computer. But when you started looking throughout the home, you could see her mental illness and her internal struggles really come out. And then you started seeing the love notes that her husband was leaving her, encouraging her, and where he was trying to get her mental health help. And he was trying to do all these things, and where she was just in this downward spiral. And if you just looked at it on the face and you only focused your investigation on the room where the bloodletting event occurred, you would only see this. But if you expanded your investigation to the rest of the house, you would get the full story of what was going on in this environment.
Yeah. Now, I know when we talked before too, when we talked down in Texas, you get asked to look at cases from other places as well, and I know that you are only one person, but there are times, and believe it or not, there's cops that listen to this from all over the country. So, because they reach out to me and they tell me that they've listened to it or they're avid watchers. One guy in North Carolina, shout out, you basically listen to this at night when you're working. But so when are you willing to take cases from, I know that there's a limit, but are you willing to look at cases from throughout the country, kind of a deal, for free, or how does that work?
So right now, where I'm at right now in my career, requests for assistance go through my chain of command and go through my department.
Okay. Then that's what I wanted to know.
Yeah.
So, and of course, if I needed you to look at a case, we could get that rolling in no time, right?
We try.
But anyway, so all right, so that's good. So, but it's not like it's beyond the realm of possibility. That is something that maybe you could do, because you do have the certifications that you do, which is incredibly, it's just crazy what you got, what kind of talent you've got. So, but you could do that on the special circumstance type case.
Potentially. Yes.
Maybe. All right.
Hey, so with TV and movies today, we dealt with all kinds of issues. How has that affected your work with, and I would think especially with jurors thinking, oh my gosh, they have this little robot in their hand and they're going to be able to tell us that this type of gun fired this at this angle. Have you had any issues with people expecting too much of what is capable?
I think it's just more that they expect it. We talk about that in the crime lab. Just, I think we do a lot of things, maybe knowing, or potentially we know that, hey, we're going to get negative results on this, most likely. But if we don't do it, we're going to have far-reaching consequences in court, better than saying, yes, we did it. No, we didn't get anything. And then we go on. But the juries, today, and I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. They are taking us to task on this. And because a lot of those shows, their science is good. Maybe their timeline is, I always joke with the juries, the difference in my job in CSI is that I don't generally solve a case in 45 minutes plus commercials. That's just not how it works. So it takes us a lot longer because that we have to take a lot of time. But they expect that. And so you have to be able to bring that product to market. And the technology exists, and thankfully we're very fortunate we have a lot of that technology, but you have to know how to work it, and you still have to understand the science behind it. Like, all the bells and whistles are great, but if you don't know how to do that with a pen and paper, a calculator and a crayon is, when I tell the people I'm training, like, you have to understand how that works at its core, because the math hasn't changed from 20, 30, 40, 100 years ago. We're just doing it a different way.
Yeah.
So like, you have to know what that means at the core and what the value of that is.
And what would be like, I was going to say, what would be like an example of an answer you would give to a juror if, hey, there's this gun gets found in somebody's car, but their fingerprints aren't on it. And the defense is going to just harp on that. Oh my gosh. Yeah, sure. The gun was in there. He didn't know about it. And did you find his prints on it? No. So what would be an explanation you would give to either like, smudged prints or no prints at all? And if that's,
oh, we talk about that all the time about, the fact that, if I'm cold or I'm not sweating, or I just washed my hands and the soap took the oil off my hands. Like, we talk about all the potential times that I touch something and I don't leave a fingerprint, or how many times, like, turn your doorknob and go see if your prints are on it. No, they're not, because you just moved, you the way you handle something, the way you twist something. And with guns, we talk about the surfaces and the rough surfaces. And we talk about there's so much potential for you to touch something and not leave a print, or not leave a legible print. Like, there's a difference in me being able to say, okay, a human touched that versus this human touched that. Right. Those are two different things. So we spend a lot of our time talking about that.
Are there some people that just don't excrete very much, and they're just not really prone to leaving prints? Because there's a guy that I've thought about for years that I've always thought, this guy just must not leave prints behind.
Yeah, we see that. Yeah, we see that. There are some people who just don't leave very good prints, and there are some people who leave excellent prints.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. We've got about 2 minutes left here. Anything, Ron? Go ahead, Ronnie.
No, that thing has always. I'm glad there are people like you who are staying up to date on everything and can get in court and explain the stuff, because I know that's just a huge thing that I've dealt with over the years of defense attorneys trying to attack, all this science nowadays, and jurors, haven't you guys seen this on TV? So when there's people like you who can get in there and properly explain that what you just did, I just think that's just a great tool that the police departments in general have, and just it's greatly appreciated that there are people like you around who can do that.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. And I want to add to that real quick too, that I think that here's what I visualize in the next 10 years. And this may be completely unrealistic, but the world of DNA and everything else is just going exponentially quick. And I really could see a jury sitting in a jury box and basically putting on virtual goggles and going through the entire crime scene as if they were there. And I'm not talking like Atari, looking at like you're playing an Atari game. I'm talking about really, it's like you're watching it on TV. And I see that. I see that coming in the near future. Not to mention the fact, I would think that in your discipline, especially with bloodstain pattern analysis, is AI, artificial intelligence, coming into any of this?
There is actually research being done in that area. Yes, sir.
Okay, I figured as much.
I was going to say real quickly along those same lines, like the total station, would that be an option for the AI, or I mean for the goggles?
Yeah, so those are both actually things that are being looked at currently. Yeah.
Well, listen, I can't thank you enough. Honestly, I already can tell you that you are gifted to be, and I'm not just saying that because you're on here, but you are the most, you're probably the most, your resume's got to be one of the most impressive resumes we've ever had on this show by far. And man, it's great to have people like you in our stable of people that technically we could reach out to in the future. I want to thank you for being here. It has been a great pleasure. Hopefully those of you that have been watching us has gotten something out of this. Ronnie, I already look smarter because I've already listened to her, but you do look a little smarter since we started this.
I could tell that. I'm like, oh my gosh, I know more stuff.
We've got to run right now. I'm working on the guest for the next week. We've hit the wall. Amanda's got to go to the next show. But listen, Ashleigh, stick around for a quick minute. We'll talk after this. Thank you all very much. If you're looking to buy that book, buy the book. If you have any questions, feel free to post them on here. And if they're good questions, I'll send them on to her, or she may see them herself. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Ashleigh. I really do appreciate you.
Thank you.
And all right. See you all. Take us out, Amanda.